All right, guys, well, join me in welcoming Evan Stern, the host, producer, creator of Vanishing Postcards, the podcast. Evan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk with you just about interviewing and crafting a narrative. Vanishing Postcards, I've been listening, and it is a phenomenal demonstration in how to take a story and just bring it to life. So how did you decide to kind of look at this this narrative? How'd you come up with this idea?
Well, I mean, I think that the histories that are explored in the series aren't histories that have really gotten that much attention over the years. And I think some of it is this is very much an issue that is universal. The landscape for this season is Texas, but the issues that my hometown of Austin are grappling with in terms of change, are the same issues that people are dealing with in New York City, in California. And I think so often, whenever like an old institutional business, an old dive bar, an old hangout closes, you'll have all of these people come out of the woodwork just weeping, going, "Oh my goodness, this is the most horrible thing ever." But a question for me is, when was the last time you actually went and supported these places? And, in my hometown of Austin, people always complain about how much the city has changed. But actually, I think that there is a lot that is still there if people look for it. And so I really wanted to find a way to shine a light on some of what's still left there. I don't think that change is something that we should fear. I think that change is something that we should embrace. But if we're going to change and grow, we have to grow responsibly. I think that so much of what draws people to Austin is its culture, its environment. What saved New York City in the 1970s from completely going under was its culture. People didn't abandon New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina because of its culture. And so it really is kind of a call to arms to just kind of showcase, beautiful local culture that exists and merits attention.
How do you get people to tell you the story of this place in a way that makes sense?
Well, that was that's an interesting episode that you bring up there. So basically, I let each episode kind of inform the other one in the series. It really, it was like I would tackle a subject in each episode, and then I would step back and say, okay, what should we take a look at next? And so I had done an episode on a dive bar. I'd done an episode on a dance hall, and I thought to myself, well, what else is Texas known for? Texas is known for honky tonks. And what is a honky tonk? What makes a honky tonk different than a dance hall? Right. And so there was I was familiar with this bar that I'd been to years ago in a town called Bandera, Texas, called Arky Blues Silver Dollar, which is now the oldest continuously operating honky tonk in Texas by some estimates. Wow. And so I wanted to go there to do a piece on this. Now, this was, of course, I tackled this pre-COVID. And so before the pandemic hit, I had the luxury of just showing up at a place. And I walked into the Silver Dollar completely unannounced with my microphone. And I just started talking to the people there. And, really what it is it's about, approaching people with respect, introducing yourself, establishing rapport, establishing trust. I think it becomes pretty obvious that I'm not out to ask any gotcha questions.
Right.
And then you just sit down and you start talking to them, and you meet the most remarkable people. I find that it takes a lot. Definitely, it takes a lot of courage to do something like that. But I often found that I was probably more nervous than the people I was, asking the questions of, because I was always trying to ask myself, am I sounding respectful? Am I asking the right kinds of questions in this situation? But in that situation, I wanted to interview the bar owner, Arky Blue. He's an old country singer. And when I got there, he was cordial, but he didn't want a thing to do with it. He absolutely refused to talk to me. So I kind of thought to myself, well, what am I going to do here? But to my great joy, just about everyone around him was more than happy to talk and happy to share stories of their own. So as a result, his refusal to talk kind of became part of the story, and you end up with a pretty interesting portrait of the man and the bar as a result of that. And there were kind of similar questions that I would end up asking a bunch of the people that I was talking to there. But you are also going to ask, a bartender a different question than a patron. And I met some truly remarkable individuals working on that one. To my great luck and joy, there was a cowboy poet who was hanging out in the bar, and we ended up talking, and he ended up with a whole separate bonus episode in addition to that.
So you're talking with people, you're getting all of this raw data. You've kind of got an idea in your head about where this narrative's headed, what you're looking for in the story as it's unfolding. So how do you decide in the editing room once you have all of this? Because I imagine for one of these episodes, you probably have hours and hours and hours that you have to weed through and pick out what's going to help you tell the story. So kind of walk me through your process. How do you decide what stays, what gets cut, and how do you tell that story?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, you're very right. I mean, I might talk to someone for an hour, and out of that hour, I might only use 5 minutes. It's really about mining for those nuggets, and it really is. I think if you ever take a writing course, they're always going to tell you show, don't tell, is what it is. And so what I do is I sit down with my raw interview footage, and I just sit down and I listen for nuggets, is what I do. And they might get used, they might not. But then I step back, and you will notice certain patterns with the different people that you speak to. Some might agree, some might provide counterpoints, but it's really all about what serves the narrative that you're trying to tell. And it's important that each episode does have a sense of architecture to it. I mean, you really do have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And each episode has to say something. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to say anything profound, but you need to make certain that the stories that you're using serve that ultimate goal. For instance, an example of something that ended up on the cutting room floor. I interviewed for the first episode, which is about this dive bar in Austin called the Dry Creek Cafe. I interviewed a fantastic musician by the name of Bobby Earl Smith, and Bobby Earl and I talked for hours, and he told this fantastic story about how he formed his first band with this great local legendary singer by the name of Marcia Ball, and he talked all about the first time he met Marcia. And I initially had it in there because I thought it was just such a beautiful capsule of old Austin. But ultimately, it was too removed from the story of the bar that I was trying to tell. And so I had to part with it. And, I'm the only one that knows it went missing. But I think it would have, as good of a story as it was, I ultimately think it would have added to the length of the episode, and it kind of would have messed up with the momentum a bit.
So when you're having these conversations, these interviews with just everyday people, do you have an idea of where you want this to go to help direct the conversation there? Or are you just, hey, let's have a chat about this place and see what happens?
Well, I try to do as much pre-reporting as possible. If there are articles about the places that you can read, I try to know as much about the place going in. Now, sometimes you are going to have that luxury when you're talking to people. Sometimes you aren't. There usually are specific issues that I am interested in talking about with these places, so I certainly keep that all in mind. But what is most important, I find, when you are conducting interviews and talking with people, is that you want to ask them specific questions. You want to ask questions that are going to elicit stories and inspire self-reflections. First of all, the most important thing is establishing rapport. So, you want to talk to them just a little bit to warm them up, just to kind of, get an idea of what they're, where they're at. But I would never ask someone I would never just say to someone, just tell me about yourself. I would say to someone, can you maybe describe for me your childhood home? And what is your, if we're talking about a bar, I'd say, well, what is your first memory of this place? And then, you know, something that's always good is, you know, a phrase that I find works a lot is, you know, can you just tell me about this? You know, just ask someone to, and that kind of, you know, that kind of gets the juices going. And, you know, it's also important too, you don't want every question to be, you know, about like a deep issue as well. You want to remember, you need to remember how to talk to people. I mean, it is a conversation that you're having. And, you know, when you're talking with people, it's important to listen. You know, I think listening is probably the most important skill that you can cultivate, and empathy.
I think those two skills help you, at least it comes out in your interviews and your shows. It helps you get to that next level of the actual story, the good parts, if you will. Because anyone, you know, they'll tell you, yeah, we did this and that over there. But by listening to what they've told you and asking that next level, that's really interesting. Tell me about the building. It really drops to that next level. If there is, I don't know, one piece of advice that you could give to a podcaster, whether they're just getting started and they're still trying to craft that idea of what is my show actually going to be, or if it's someone who's been doing it for years, who is listening to this, trying to get better at crafting a narrative through interviews, through storytelling, what's one thing that you would recommend we do to tell better stories?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing to do, first of all, is just to try it. You know, get messy. You know, you don't even have to. I'd encourage someone who's interested in, you know, obviously the approach that I come from is documentary storytelling. But if you're interested in that, I mean, just talk to your friends, talk to people in your family, and see what stories you can craft out of that. You know, don't even like burden yourself with the need to put together a podcast. That I didn't. Ultimately, I did want to put a podcast with what I was doing, but you know, it wasn't like I had this grand thought out vision when I started doing this. It just kind of revealed itself as I started working on it. So, you know, first of all, the most important thing is just to do it. You know, don't try, do. Obviously, you know, I highly recommend taking courses if you want to, but I think that you're going to learn the most just by forcing yourself to do this. But beyond that, I think what is really important is just having a good focused narrative, which is something that we've touched on as well. Just know what stories that you want to tell and focus on that. You know, you don't want to, if you put together a show where you're trying to please everyone, 100%. You're going to please absolutely no one. I think that the beauty of podcasting is that it is a specific niche medium. And I actually think that the more specific you are, the stronger you're going to be in the stories that you're telling. It's going to help you and liberate you if you can really get a specific vision about what you want to do. If you can describe your show in 1 or 2 sentences,
absolutely,
that's what you want. So specificity is your friend.
Evan, what's something that you're working on now that is exciting to you? Besides Vanishing Postcards.
What's something I'm working on right now? Well, besides Vanishing Postcards, you know, that's a good question. I've been enjoying, so I started Vanishing Postcards. I told Chris before we started talking, I started working on it in January of 2020. And I actually live in New York, although the landscape for the series is my beautiful, much beloved home state of Texas. Texas is my homeland. New York, though, has been home for many years. So I've honestly just been, I left town on March 8th. For what was supposed to be a 10-day family vacation to Mexico. And it then became an extended detour in Texas that basically lasted a year. So right now I have to say I'm really loving being back in New York. I'm loving walking around, and I'm really enjoying working on getting rid of some of the COVID weight that I gained while I was in Texas eating and drinking so much. So I'm really enjoying working at getting rid of this COVID weight. I'll tell you that right now. It's delicious. It's all wonderful. It is.
All right. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining us today. There is a lot to pull out of this that we can apply, even if we don't have an interview based or a documentary style podcast. There's a lot to apply and just become better at our craft. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. So first of all, Vanishing Postcards. You can find it wherever you're getting your podcast. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast right now, I'm quite confident you'll be able to find us there. Apple, Spotify, Google, all the big guns. You can find us there. You can also find Vanishing Postcards on Instagram or vanishingpostcards.com. And you can get in touch with me very easily in any of those places if you want to reach out for any reason. Evan, I'm absolutely happy to talk to you.